Alright everyone, it's tax season again, which means that I got thinking about what proportion of my money was going to be used to go make people miserable overseas, and I got a solution. I know it sounds simplistic, but why don't we just stop doing that and lower everyone's taxes? This works for everyone. See, the left these days is constantly rambling about evil world policing. You're not allowed to fight people anymore. The military's bad. Okay, well, we'll reduce its budget. By the way, we should reduce all the other bureaucratic budgets too. The military is basically a bureaucratic apparatus at this point because it's being mismanaged by Congress in every capacity they can. It'd be better if we just had some wild boy barbarian dude lead the military. It'd be like a consul or something. It would make more sense just to have some dude covered in fucking scars lead the military and tell us what we need. Some fucking modern day Rambo, as opposed to having Congress, trying to dip their finger into the situation, because they just make a mess of everything. War shouldn't be left to the politicians, in other words. Beginning to think that movie was prescient. Anyway, I wonder what proportion of it's going to be used to buy the bullets and rockets and shit that gets launched at third worlders, or even worse. This is even worse. It's not even so much, well, I'm paying the U.S. military to go kill people for me. Okay, well, at least an American is getting a salary, I suppose. What about when we send free shit, like when we were arming the FSA, when we send free shit to terrorists? How much of my money, what proportion of the, considerable sum that I owe Uncle Sam, how many cents or dollars out of that is going to go into the pocket of some crazy mercenary fanatic over in some godforsaken desert who has, who wants to enslave people? Some slaver in North Africa or something like that. How much is my government going to pay to some group like that through the dark back channels of the CIA to go and kill the enemies of the United States on the sly outside of the Geneva Convention? And yeah, how much money am I going to pay for that? Is it going to be hundreds of dollars? Thousands? Hell, I don't know year to year. The Pentagon's discretionary spending is so opaque we don't even know what half of it goes for. It goes missing routinely, probably because it gets siphoned off into groups that we're not supposed to be paying, criminal enterprises and so forth. Are we paying cartels to behead fewer people, fewer American citizens? Don't raise problems, here's $1 million. Unfortunately, that really happens, and I'm helping to pay for it, and it really makes me upset. Now, before you think this is an anti-American spiel, hell no. If I were Russian, it'd be the same thing. Every government does that sort of stupid shit. They all pay off evildoers. This is why we need less government. That's why I propose we slash taxes, slash the size and scope of government, privatize what we still need to maintain but that doesn't need to be federal, and everything else we eliminate it entirely. Put government back where it belongs, into a very, very small box, and keep it there as a cute little thing that we can look at. Government reminds me of the movie Gremlins. Of course, you get this cute little, teddy bear looking thing, this little, I don't know, space alien or cryptid or whatever the hell it's supposed to be. The wise Chinese dude, of course, at the end, taking care of things with his, magic, I think, or something. And as long as you keep it small, as long as you don't overfeed it and let it do whatever it wants and give in to its natural inclination to gorge itself and do crazy shit, it won't turn into a monster. Unfortunately, if you do, it multiplies and becomes tyrannical and insane, and then you have problems. That's basically what government is like. We should keep it in its box and pat it on the head and give it a little treat now and then and, keep it small and unobtrusive and cute so that it can't do stupid shit. That's why I think we should do the opposite of everything that Bernie Sanders is proposing. No, government shouldn't get into healthcare, it should get out of it. Our healthcare system was better when it was fully privatized. It was more affordable. More Americans could afford healthcare, and the healthcare was considerably cheaper. And our healthcare system, by the way, was still making leaps and bounds beyond almost any other country in the world back when it was totally privatized. We're talking, early atomic era. There was some government regulation there, not for the most part, not on the modern order of things. On a modern scale, orders of magnitude less. Education. Federal government steps in and starts making more and more federal regulations on education. Have they helped a thing, or are the educational attainment rates across the board largely still dropping? Well, they're largely still dropping because government got involved, and it's expensive. It used to be, and even the left-wing media fact checks this and finds it to be true. Back in the 50s, a person flipping burgers part-time for the summer could pay their goddamn college tuition. A person of reasonable lower middle class means could put themselves through college. They graduate with a handshake, they get a decent job, and then within 2 years they've got their own home, half more mortgage is paid off. They've got several cars and a 2-car garage and 2 kids and a picket fence. That was sort of the American dream of that era, and it was achievable back then. The boomers got to live through that. We don't get to live through that. We have to bust ass. We have to bust ass in order to get that American dream. And then when we get our home, there's no telling, the bank might just randomly just steal it anyway. The government might decide, hey, we need to sell your house in order to kill more people overseas. It's a pile of horse shit. Taxes should be lower for everyone. Yeah, that includes the super rich. Yeah, I think that big companies, millionaires should pay less taxes. Absolutely. Because every penny that we're giving to the government is a penny wasted anyway. Most of the shit that they do, we could do ourselves. Now, why specifically do you need a government to centrally administer things anyway? Is it because the people that make up government, the argument of leftism, and this is what I've never gotten, the argument of big government types. You're saying that people are corrupt, so they need a strong government to keep things in check, to organize things, to distribute the welfare, to prevent crime and stuff. If humans have such terrible inclinations, wouldn't empowering them with legal power make those inclinations worse and more abusive? Wouldn't they, as a tendency, wouldn't they just strike backroom deals and graft money off the top and embezzle and do crazy shit? And of course they do. The proof is in the pudding. We see that throughout time. The bigger and stronger the government, the more corruption it is. It doesn't even matter how well-meaning the people who found it. Even if you have some people in government who are noble and trying to do the right thing, they tend to just get swept up in a haze of lobbyists and coke-snorting backroom dealers and snake oilers. They tend to worm their way into government. It's like the Gilded Age. People think that the Gilded Age arose because a handful of really rich crooks decided to fuck with the economy, and the progressives came along and got rid of them, and thank the Lord for Teddy Roosevelt and the leftists. But that's not what happened. The Gilded Age was preceded by an era of several decades of carpetbagging in which government granted de facto monopolies to business entities. These business entities then got abusive. They started price fixing. And when people in the government at first did nothing because they were in the pockets of the same groups they gave monopolies to in the first place, other people said, hey, maybe this is a problem. But instead of putting the genie back in the box by allowing private competition and deregulating things, they did the opposite. They said, this leftism, which is what it was, this centrality in government intervention has caused a problem. Let's add another layer of it. That'll solve it. And then it did, technically speaking, only it created a totally new, even worse layer. And then later on, they did the same thing with the war on poverty. And now there are people who suggest we add a 4th layer to this. I disagree. I think we should get rid of all the other layers. Privatize as much as possible. Yeah, you should lower my taxes. It's the ethical, just, right, kind thing to do. Some of these people talk about, well, we're going to be kind to the poor. Yes, private charities. Which would, by the way, probably have a lot more income and be able to disperse it locally and regionally much more efficiently if the only regulation on them was, hey, you can't defraud people. You got to actually be charitable. And then you take them to court if they're not. There you go. Problem solved. No, you don't need publicly funded charitable movements. People have always had philanthropy in mind. Poverty hasn't gone away because of the war on poverty. If anything, it's getting worse. What you've done is you've uplifted the poorest, but you've shoved everyone else down so that you've got this huge lowest common denominator of society that's basically, they've got food in their belly, but it's like fucking reheated burritos, and you have to give them constant subsidies just to keep their kids from starving. Well, they're never going to get out of that poverty. There's no upward mobility because you've ruined capitalism. If you want to be generous to them, let their skilled children hopefully compensate for, maybe mistakes that were made in the past and do better. But they can't do that right now. They can't even afford a fucking goddamn education because the government's made it too expensive through limitless grants to institutions. They've taken a portion of the economy, pumped it. They've basically taken over education anyway. When government money is the prime factor behind its operation, when government money pours into something, the government is gaining a share in what it's putting money into. This is how people need to start thinking. The government's essentially buying stock in the educational industry, stock in the pharma industry. There's an interplay there, and the worst people involved, the most corrupt, tend to get the most of that moolah. That's why my taxes should go down. I should pay at the very least, I should have a reduction of 50% in my taxes. I'm not being greedy. I want less third worlders to starve, and I want my fellow Americans to get ahead more. I'm a capitalist, and damn proud of it. That's about all. Peace out.